And we've got a marvellous race on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. Morgan from Wales in third, closely followed by John from Scotland. But now, moving into first place is Stephen from England, looking full of running, and the race is on. But wait, Stephen appears to be dropping back. He's running off the track. My word, it appears he's had some news. He's just run over and picked up some headphones to listen to something. We're getting reports that the podcast Jog On has just released a new episode, and clearly Stephen just couldn't wait to the end of the race to listen. Well, this is a shock. Missing out on a chance for a gold medal to listen to Harry Morgan's podcast? I must say I am bewildered.
Hello, Harry here, and welcome to Jog On, a podcast that produces both audio and video for the running world. Jog On also has a YouTube channel titled Jog On with Harry Morgan, so if you find yourself with a spare moment, go check it out. If you enjoy this episode, please do share it with a friend who may enjoy listening. It helps us get out there a little bit more and grow. Thank you. It's episode time. In running, the 5k distance is becoming ever more popular with the rise of parkrun, a free weekly timed event every Saturday morning around the world. According to 5krunning.com, the average parkrun time in the United Kingdom is currently just under 29 minutes. Many of you listening will have produced a time under 25 minutes. Some of you may have experienced the pace required to break 22 minutes, which, if you're interested, is 4:23 for every kilometre or 7:04 per mile. Fewer still have broken that infamous barrier of 20 minutes to dip into the teens. To achieve this, a runner must maintain an average pace of 3:59 per kilometre or 6:26 for every mile run. If you can get under 18 minutes for a 5k, you are starting to place highly in all but the most attended parkruns around the country. And on a particularly good day, you even have a shot of winning it. Now imagine, if you can, covering that 5k distance in 15 minutes and 40 seconds. And we're not talking about a male. The guest on this episode has done exactly that. In fact, she has produced times that put her in an extremely small group of elite female runners. She has had the opportunity to compete with the best, run for Great Britain, and has spent most of her life dedicated to this pursuit. But recently, due to serious injury, she has had to take time out of the sport to heal.
I think you've got to be able to let it go. And it's been hard for me to that realisation that I could let it go.
A while back, we crossed paths, and the conversation led to Jog On. I asked her if she'd like to tell her story. She agreed, and so a date was set. What follows is the conversation we had. She's a unique person, and I'm just grateful I got the chance to meet her. So please, welcome to Jog On, Louise Small.
Before 14, I was doing lots of different sports, and it came to me later because my brother, he would take part in cross-country races at the local primary school. He must have only been in about year 2 or year 3, but he was pretty much lapping everybody that was like 2 or 3 years older than him. And I guess I was kind of inspired by him to take up running.
I heard you say in a separate interview that he eventually dropped it, but do you think that if he'd kept it up, he would also have a chance?
Yeah, he definitely showed a lot of potential in running. It's a really fascinating conversation about whether it's something that you're born with in your genetics or whether it's hard work. And I kind of believe it's a bit of an element of all things put together. And I do think my brother and I had this kind of natural aptitude to running. We were quite successful at it. And I think once you're successful, you then want to keep persevering and trying with it. Yeah, so I think he definitely had a lot of talent there. And he started then being traipsed around cross-country races while I competed. I think it put him off a little bit. He saw the kind of hard work that I was putting in, and it wasn't for him, I guess, and he chose to go down a different path.
So when you first started off, what was it that gripped you, that you found a passion for? Did you like the intensity of it, the mud, the sweat, being outside, or just being a little bit successful at a sport? What pulled you in?
I got taken to a cross-country race and there wasn't very many competitors in it, but I just loved the terrain, the going through the mud, the challenge of cross-country. And I guess I was gripped by that. I won the race, so I think that had an element to it as well. And then since then, it was like a drug. I was like addicted and I wanted to keep doing it. So I went back to school. I asked my teacher to enter me for the districts, and I did the districts, and it was a bit organic. It went from there, and now I wouldn't be without it.
What was the actual thing that you found you were good at? Could you just keep going in a way when other people couldn't? Or did you have some basic speed? Like, what physically were you doing that you kind of went, I can run quite well here?
I think I had the endurance element. I had the stamina to keep going, where others at school, they'd run a lap and they'd be puffed out and tired, and I felt like I could just keep going. It came, I guess, quite easily to me. I then had to put in a lot of hard work to get better and sustain that kind of level that I was at. When I did start running, I remember I used to go down to the local field and I'd just run laps around the field because I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't doing any specific training, but I thought, I'll just go do 12 laps around the field, and people would watch me and come up to me and be like, why are you running so many laps around the field? And I'd be like, oh, I'm just enjoying it. And I think I liked being out in the open. I like the feeling of being free, and you can think about things. Like, all my best ideas come from when I'm running, and that's what I'm really missing at the moment. Now I'm injured because I don't get that time to think about things.
It's weird, isn't it? When people who don't run as much or think about running, they've tried it and they find it really hard. They do just associate it with the physical aspect, but there's something so mental about running. There's something almost quite spiritual in it. You can kind of get a bit lost in it. And I think as you get quite fit, and when running isn't hard and everything's moving nicely, you're right, your mind slips into other places and you can think about quite stressful things, but for some reason you have this calm, and it gives you a nice perspective on things.
Oh, definitely. It's so good for your mental health. Like we were saying, you can process ideas better, just feel quite zen about things, and you can rationalise things that seem really stressful, like at work when you're really stressed, suddenly don't seem as big a deal when you've run and you thought about all the possibilities and figured out a scenario of what you're going to do.
I have this conversation sometimes, and one thing that comes up a lot is people starting running later in life. And I've almost got to a point now where I just have to say to them, you need to be willing to go through half a year of basically hell, like just hurting, and then you kind of be okay with it. Because this idea that I haven't improved in 2 weeks, it's like, well, no, it's a big process to build up that foundation. But what's interesting is that for yourself and myself, I mean, for most people, they'll roll their eyes at 14 and go, oh yeah, it started late. But it's something we've done since we were kids, basically, and never really stopped. And I was reading this really fascinating article the other day about the idea that you do have a bit of an advantage having started so young, because you've essentially built up a cardiovascular system. I can't speak for it because I'm not a scientist, but bone density and like just the width of the arteries, things like that. And I don't know about you, but I've found that even if I take a bit of a hiatus from running like you are at the moment because of injury, you come back to it. It comes back more quickly than anyone who starts it later on in life. Have you kind of experienced that? There's a foundation there?
Oh, I definitely agree with that. It's definitely easier to start these sports when you're younger. If you do have a break from it, you can get back to it relatively quickly. It's almost like it's that muscle memory. Your body has been there before. It knows what it's doing. So if you do have a break, it picks it kind of straight back up again.
And I think maybe that's one of the nice things you've got to look forward to, that for you it will just be retraining and remembering what that process felt like.
Yeah, exactly.
The way you miss running, do you find that you can sort of supplement it with other training, or does it not come close?
I was having this conversation with someone else the other day. So at the moment I'm doing lots of swimming and indoor cycling, but for me it isn't the same as running. It doesn't give me that same fulfilling satisfaction. It also doesn't give me the same stress relieving sort of properties, those mental health issues we were sort of talking about. I'm really enjoying the swimming. I'm enjoying the challenge. I'm trying to perfect my tumble turn. That's my challenge at the moment.
Oh, really?
So I am setting myself goals and targets. I've always enjoyed swimming, but it just isn't quite the same as running for me.
Have you done aquathlons where you swim and run?
No, someone suggested that I could have a go at that.
I had a thought about it the other day because I noticed that swimming seems to be this sport that, yes, it's nothing like the running, but you seem to have an ability at it, and especially if you're at a tumble turning point, what I can tell you is incredibly hard. I've never mastered it, I just drown. But yeah, that could be an interesting thing to look at in the future. But it's interesting that it doesn't quite tick the box in the same way. Do you think that's because it's not quite as natural to you? You just don't have quite the same success at it?
I don't know. I think there's just something really natural about running. It's like you don't need a piece of equipment. All you need is a pair of trainers. And even then, you don't. If you wanted to run barefoot, you could. It's something, I guess, primal, isn't it? It's something that anybody can do. And that's why I really like running, because it's just really pure.
There's less of a barrier to entry with running. It's such a raw thing. It requires the least equipment of anything. Like you say, you don't even need trainers. If you really want to run down the beach, you could just do it barefoot.
Yeah.
But there's always this part of me that compares it to this animalistic thing of I can't keep up with a shark while swimming. Cycling is a weird thing we've made up where we've shaped some metal into a vehicle that we then pedal with wheels. So that's a weird thing anyway when you really break it down. But running, like the idea of endurance running is something that, I mean, if you ever look into things like persistence hunting and the idea of people running down animals, that always fascinates me. And that word primal you used is always something that's gripped me about running. So maybe it is something about, for you, Louise Small, as well, that it's just tapping into something biologically that gives you you feel like you're meant to do it.
Yeah.
So you get scouted by Mick Wood.
Yeah.
Talk me through that process. What was the first conversation? How did that happen?
So I started when I was 14. I then spent the next year kind of dabbling with running, doing a few competitions, but not taking it too seriously. Thought about joining a club, but hadn't yet. I then went to the district track competition and I did a 1500 metre and I finished third, I believe. And it was at this race Mick Woods got one of the other girls that was racing the race to come and get me, and he came over and spoke to me and said, you know, you could be really good at running. I think you could run for Great Britain. And I was a bit like, who is this random man that's come up to me and said that I could run for Great Britain? Just started from there and joined the club and never looked back. I've been there ever since.
How long did it take you to also be like, yeah, I think I could run for GB? Did the self-confidence come quickly, or was that a long process?
I think when I joined the club, it was at an era where there was a lot of really good girls. We had Steph Twell, Emma Pallant, Charlie Purdue, Lily Partridge. So I was inspired by them and they trained so hard. And I thought, well, that's what I've got to do. I've got to train that hard to be that good. But to be honest with you, my first GB vest just came totally out of the blue. It wasn't a target at all. It just happened. I just ran the time that I needed and suddenly I was on a plane going to Ostrava and I was like, what is going on? This is crazy. So I guess deep down there was confidence building. But I think when you first start out, you're just enjoying it. You're young, you're having fun. And there's not too much pressure on you because you've just started. I think the challenges then come as you get older and you expect yourself, well, I've made a GB team now. I need to go on and do this and I need to do this. And that's when it gets more difficult.
What was that race that you got the GB vest at?
It was the World Youth Championship.
And do you know once you get the time that that's a thing, or does someone have to contact you?
Someone had to contact you. So you had to run a time and do a trial race,
yeah,
finish in a certain position, and then you get called whether you're on the team or not.
What was your reaction when you found out?
I think I was super excited. I remember I was at school actually and Mum came and told me at school. I think I cried, probably knowing me, but cried with happy tears.
So you've done some 1500 metres and stuff, but really you started to move up in distance and start to find success at 5 and 10K. Mm-hmm. Where for you so far in your career, because you're still young enough that by no means should you ever talk about it like it's this done thing. So far, what do you think's been your favourite and most successful distance?
I really, really enjoy the 5K. I wouldn't say it's my most successful distance because now I feel like it's more of a game for the 1500 metre runners that have got the endurance but have the speed at the end, and I don't quite have that speed. I am more of an endurance bunny, but I do love the challenge of the 5K. I think my distance is probably going to be more 10K, half marathon is where my strengths lie, and the marathon has always been my kind of ultimate goal. I love running a long distance. I love my sort of Sunday morning long run.
And it is very common for people to slowly progress and work their way up, and it's strange. People hit their 30s and then they kind of move into this next length. It's weird. It's just this ladder that people climb in distance. What do you like about 5K? Is it the intensity or the just the sheer speed of it?
It's that nice balance between it's an endurance event, but there's a little bit of speed and tactics involved. So if you can hang on for a long time and then you've got a kick at the end, you can do quite well in the 5K. So I like the tactics involved in that. Whereas the 10K, because it's that little bit longer, I wouldn't say there's as many tactics involved in it as the 5K. It's quite close to the 3K and 15, which is what I was doing as a youngster.
There's almost an element of nostalgia there.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you think now when you come back from this period, do you think you'll come back at 10K half marathon target? Do you have a sort of plan in mind?
I really don't know at the moment. The severity of my injury, I just don't know if I'm even going to be able to go on the track again. I really don't know. because of the way I've basically torn my Achilles, and we're hoping that it'll heal with conservative treatment. I don't know how much load I'm going to be able to put onto it. It might be that the marathon is actually going to be a better route because it's longer, slower, less intensity, and maybe I will have to step away from the track, but that's something that I've got to figure out when I come back, I guess.
Does it worry you? Do you think about it much? Does it weigh on your mind, or have you got quite good at being like, well, what will be will be?
I think I've got better at that as I've got older. This isn't my first injury. I've been through it before. I've been told by many people that I should switch sports and give up. So I'm kind of used to that, and I kind of like proving people wrong. You know, I was told with this injury that it was very unlikely to heal on its own, and then 3 weeks later I had another scan and it made significant improvements. So, you know, your body is amazing. It can do some incredible things, and
it's crazy what it can do.
Exactly. So I think if I can get it healed without having an operation, that's the best route for me right now.
And even now in this day and age, there is still a culture of we could go in and operate, and you always think like if we could just do it naturally, that's paramount goal.
Yeah, exactly.
I understand there's a bit of a weird history of injury, but what was it that originally happened with the Achilles?
So this Achilles has been an issue for over 8 years now. I had this extra tendon called a plantaris. Some people have them, some people don't. It's from when we were chimps and we climbed trees. So it's an extra tendon that we don't need. And mine was irritating my Achilles. So I had an operation to remove that. That didn't sort it. I had another operation to clean the Achilles. That didn't sort it. I then had a bone spur shaved in my Achilles. So after that third operation, I was then good to go. And I then had 6 years of no problems with this Achilles. And now it's reared its head again. I've basically torn it. I couldn't tell you when it happened because there wasn't a specific moment. I'm guessing it was just happening over a period of time and I just wasn't aware of it.
Achilles are a weird one as well because they're obviously a critical part of the anatomy, and yet it's frustrating because there's a percentage of your body, it's like everything else is ready to go, like my quad, my hamstring.
Exactly.
And I guess the calf is affected as a direct result of this, and this is something you have to build up with strength training.
Yeah, so that's what I'm currently doing at the moment. I've had issues with this calf and its strength, and it's been something that I've been working on for a while. So I'm continuing to work on that with the rehab. So I do this occlusion training where you basically cut off the circulation from your leg and just do lots of calf raises to try and strengthen it up. Yeah, it's quite painful.
If you cut off the blood flow slightly, that's going to increase its ability to try to...
Yeah, it's basically working in a hypoxic way. So it's almost like taking your leg to altitude, effectively.
Wow, okay, yeah.
So you can basically, I can do it at a lower weight because my calf obviously can't cope with it. But by cutting the circulation off, it's almost like working it at a higher weight, if that makes sense.
Wow, okay. Like taking your one leg to altitude.
Yeah.
That's such an I'm processing that. That's amazing. Flipping it back to a slightly more positive time, back to the successful period.
Yeah.
A huge win that you've cited before was the one in Poland. Like that was the stomach touching the ribbon type moment. Yeah. Is that still one of the pinnacle moments? Like, what do you remember when you think of the real successes?
Yeah, running through the tape, everything comes together and it feels like all the hard work that you've put in is culminated in that win. I try with every race, no matter what position I come in, to look at the positives from it. Obviously everyone goes into a race and they want to win it. That's not always a realistic target. So you set sub goals so that you can come out of the race with a positive outcome, even if you don't win. But crossing the finish line when you know that you are the best in that field on that day, there's kind of no better feeling than that.
So the win in Poland was somewhere near Warsaw?
Warsaw, correct.
On that day, did you think that was a good shot or was it a surprise?
I guess it was a little bit of a surprise, and I kind of like it when it's a surprise. It's like that nice surprise, isn't it? I think sometimes you put a lot of expectation on yourself to go into a race and win it, and then when it doesn't happen, you're really disappointed. Whereas I like to go into a race, you know, not expecting that I'm necessarily going to win it. So if I do, it is kind of a nice surprise. So that one was a nice surprise. Because it was abroad, I didn't know who was in the field. I didn't know who my competition was. So I didn't really put any pressure on myself. I just went out there and run as quick as I could. And it happened to be good enough to win. Yeah,
that's interesting. And that, I think that mental skill of doing a race and being able to, even when it is important, being able to slow your mind down and just go, it's not important, even when it is actually quite a nice thing. That, I've got to get everything, got to go and focus and blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's going to be the difference between a 35-minute 10K and a 32-minute 10K. Like, because I think holding tension is not the best thing in running at all.
No. I think my best races come when I'm not putting pressure on myself, when I go into them relaxed. I've not got any, you know, super high expectations of where I need to finish. Yeah, I definitely run better when I am in a relaxed state, not tense, like you say. Yeah.
There's this really interesting moment in your career career that you talked about before, I'm trying to remember how it worked now. Yeah, you'd sort of been out with injury and just kind of been cross-training, so hadn't even really been running. And you came back and you ran a 10K, not only well, but ran a PB. First of all, that's a bit of a, I don't want to swear, that's a little mentally jarring.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, hang on, what if I'm doing all this training? How did I just get a PB out of nowhere? So looking back on that, do you put that down to, I just had this complete reset on my body of like, I hadn't run for a while, so I was very fresh. Like, why? What happened that day to make you run a PB off not much running?
Oh yeah, I know. I think in a way that performance last year psyched out my performance this year because I got it so wrong this year, and I think I'd been putting so much pressure on myself because I couldn't work out how I had done it last year because it all just fell into place, but it almost shouldn't have fallen into place, if that makes sense. I'd had 3 weeks completely off. I had cross-trained really hard, like I was cycling and swimming twice a day every day, so I put in a lot of hours in the pool to make up for the fact that I wasn't running. But I think it was again that I just went into the race so relaxed. I was literally like, if I get to halfway and the injury's hurting, I'm going to stop. I had no expectation on myself. Every lap I ran, I was like, okay, I'm feeling okay, so I'll keep going. And then the next lap, oh, I'm still feeling okay, I'll keep going. And then before I knew it, I'd worked my way up into, well, I didn't even know at the time, I'd worked my way up into third place. Because it was mixed with the European competition, I didn't exactly know where I was. And when I crossed the finish line, somebody came up and told me I'd come third in the British Champs. And I was like, what? I had no idea. It was just so relaxed, I wasn't stressed, and it was just such a nice surprise.
And for people to understand, this is on a track, so these are 400-meter laps.
Yes.
And because people are like, why wouldn't you know where you are? When you do 10,000 meters, that's a lot of laps of a 400-meter track.
Laps.
That's a lot. And so maybe it's a good thing that you didn't know, because you haven't got Jess Judd bearing down on you or something, because you're like, well, I don't even know where she is, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. You are totally focused on yourself, and that's what I was that day. I was not worrying about anybody else. I was more worried about if my leg was going to hurt or something else, or I was focusing on other things, not the race. And it just went so well for me. I just felt so good. I literally have never felt that good before. It felt so easy. Those are very rare. You feel those type of races maybe once or twice a year, I'd say, where everything just falls together and you just feel incredible. But most of the time you don't feel like that. It feels like a real slog and it feels really hard.
But the beauty with running is you only need 1 or 2 moments for it all to come together to, first of all, get the vest or just execute in that moment. But also the thing I love about running is that you then just have a number by your name for the rest of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
As Louise Small, you will always have that PB. And even if it all ended tomorrow, it's there, it's in history.
It's not erased, exactly.
Yeah, and I've always really liked that. Track running and road running are two very different things. Do you enjoy the road running more because of the variation, or do you like the laps, sweat it out, get fast times?
I think I prefer the track, only because I think that's where my first GB vest came from. And also there's no argument about whether a course is short or long, or there's always big debates about that, whereas the track is so accurate. If you run a time on the track, you can compare it to this person in Poland or America because they have also run on a track.
Yeah, it's very formulaic. There is a nice conformity to it that I like about track. But it's hard. It's tough.
Yeah, it's tough.
Track training is one of the most amazing things. And if you can ever get down, clubs, obviously, as you know, even the more sociable clubs offer a track session.
Yeah.
And it's tricky because some of the people who kind of want to get better are scared of going down to the track. But it's such a staple part of a good training regime and being able to, like you say, just know where you're at and measure it. And a great way to measure, I'll go do a 5K, see where I'm at, what kind of time I've got. Track is an amazing way to do that.
Yeah, it's so measurable. You can, keep track of your times. I think it's just an easy way to see where you're at in your training. But also I like variety. I wouldn't go on the track 3-4 times a week, plus you're more likely to get injured. But I think it's nice to have the track there as one of your sessions a week, but also have the road and the grass and other aspects. So
you have this fascinating history of this career that's obviously so running based, but you also alongside it have qualified to be a teacher. That's a whole juggling act in of itself. So far that's ebbed and flowed in terms of, am I going full pro now? Am I doing a bit of teaching? What's that balance been like?
I used to find with the running, it was a hard balance to get because I wanted to give my all to running and I wanted to give my all to teaching, which is why I went into teaching part-time, because I was getting a nice balance with that. I then decided that I was going to go back and do my master's and have a little break from the teaching. So for the last year and a half, I've been doing supply teaching. So I keep my hand in the teaching, but it's not a big commitment. But I have noticed, especially recently with this injury, that I am definitely somebody that needs a balance. And I don't think going full-time running would be the right move for me.
With your experience of having tried that full-time running, did you go too hard at it? Is it the mental pressure? There's no break from it mentally? It's just, I'm constantly an athlete now. There's nothing else.
I think it's just, in running, you've got a lot of time on your hands because there's only so many hours of the day you can train. If you were a triathlete, I can totally understand because they are spending hours in the pool, hours on the bike. But with running, there is only so many hours that you can actually train. So in that in-between time, you've kind of either got to rest because that's the whole point of getting recovery, or find something else to do. And I just found that I wasn't stimulating my mind enough. And then, like you say, you're just thinking about running all the time and performances and this and that, and it's just not healthy for you. I just think it's better to have something else that you can concentrate on. You know, running distracts you from your job a little bit and puts things into perspective when people are, you know, giving you extra work to do. And you're like, well, actually, I'm just going to go out for a run now because I need to go for a run. But then equally, the teaching is a good distraction from the running.
And of course, the other big one is the finances. And
well, yeah, that's a massive one.
It's a huge one. The teaching is sort of supports the running. It does actually help it in a way, as well as helping you mentally with the running by giving you a break from, I am an athlete. What's the next training session? It's also that thing of it also gives you some money to be able to fly out and do altitude training or whatever it is. As an athlete, there's a few different ways that you can get through sponsorship. There's paid appearances at certain races, and sometimes things are a bit cheaper because they'll pay for your flights out there, etc. Prize money is a big thing. In your running career so far, financially, when you do that full time, how do you fund that?
I guess the big one is support from your national governing body. If you can get that, that's huge. But in the endurance events particularly, there's not very many spots. You know, you've got to be top 1 or 2 in the country. And even then, my friend Steph Twell has only just recently got back on funding, and she's 5 times 5K champion.
Yeah, I saw a post from her, and it kind of makes you think, like, what do you have to do to get some funding running these world-class times?
She's been to the Olympics twice. She's probably about to go a 3rd time. She's got 2 Olympic qualifying times.
It's crazy, isn't it?
There's just not enough money in running, you know. People don't consume or watch athletics like they do football, so there's not as much money in it. People are only interested when the Olympics come round every 4 years, and by then it's a bit too late. So that's the first point. And then the second is a sponsorship from a kit sponsor. So for me, that's Hoka, so they support me with my clothes, and a little bit financially with performances, a certain position in a certain race or certain times that you achieve. So yeah, it's all very performance driven.
Does that change the way you treat a race? Do you find that sometimes can interfere with your head and you're thinking, well, I know that Hoka are going to pay me this? Are you able to block that out?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess it does put a little more pressure on yourself because you kind of need the money to survive. Ultimately, I guess I like to have the attitude that if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. I don't like to put too much pressure on myself, but it is obviously something that's in the back of your mind when you're competing, because that could pay for, you know, like you say, altitude chip or physio or this, that and the other.
Well, financial incentive is a bit of a weird concept in any kind of sport, really, because it's almost as though, as Louise Small, I'm not going to be the best I could be unless there's some money involved, which of course isn't the truth. So it's weird to reward performance, because to my mind, the day that you are on the track, whether I'm saying, Louise, I'll give you £1,000 check or not, I don't think you're going to push any harder. You'll push because of who you are and the passion you have for it.
Exactly. When I step and do a race, I'm going to give it everything I've got. So, you know, whether there's money there or not is kind of irrelevant. Like you say, it is a bit of a weird concept.
And then the other big one, family, parents, I guess they've been
huge, yeah.
Do you know what I was thinking about this the other day is that, I mean, I've just met your parents just now, having come over, and one of the things that hits me immediately is you have this amazing family structure, and that if everything fell apart tomorrow, you have this safety net there. There's this blanket, and I already noticed it in this environment here. It's beautiful. Well, I mean, you probably wouldn't be in the position you were without them. Did they really get behind you from 14 onwards?
Yeah, 100%. From 14, they were driving me down to Aldershot 3, 4, sometimes 5 times a week. And then they were taking me all across the country straight away. It was like no hesitation. They just supported me, no questions, straight away. They were taking me to races as far as Sunderland and then down south to Cornwall. And then recently they've been taking me on altitude trips places. They fly and watch me race. It's basically their hobby as well.
Yeah, you're in a fantastic setup to have that. It's tough when you don't have that around you. Really interesting article I read the other day, and I want to get your thoughts on this. There's this thing with female athletes where they can show incredible promise at a really young age and be running fantastic times. And then just the way the human body develops, sometimes they will just plateau and they don't see the rate of improvements. It's less common in males because the muscular development, etc. But women just change differently. Was that something you were ever aware of, or coaches ever mentioned, or you saw someone who dropped away that was once really good when you were younger?
Yeah, I saw quite a lot of girls drop out from the sport. I think it is a big thing. And I think it's that whole girls going through puberty can be a big time in a sort of young girl's life. So some girls might develop earlier, some might develop later, and I do think that possibly has an impact on whether women carry on. I know there's a lot of research going on about periods and things like that and how that affects women. So I think when I was younger, it wasn't really spoken about too much. You do notice it tended to be once girls came out of the juniors before they went into the seniors, there'd be this kind of plateau stage. But nobody's ever researched it enough.
One of the things you mentioned is altitude training, and your parents obviously treating you to a trip out there, which is awesome because it's like a holiday with purpose, which I love. And most people will be aware, but not everyone knows that altitude training is a big thing, and this is due to the lack of oxygen in the air. It's hard because it's expensive as well. So when did it start for you that you first went altitude training?
So the first trip I went on was fairly recently, not too long ago, and I went to Font-Romeu in France, which is really quite affordable place to go, and it's where Paula Radcliffe did a lot of her marathon training. So that was my first real experience of altitude.
When you're training at that height, do you really notice it?
Yes, when you first do it, you definitely do. Now I've been back quite a few times. I think lots of exposure to it. Your body's almost knows what's going on. It's, oh, okay, I've not got much oxygen. I know what I need to do. It gets used to it much quicker. But when you first go, yes, you really notice it. And if you do any sort of hard workouts on the track, anything really short, it literally feels like your lungs are on fire.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept because it's sort of this, absolute performance enhancer that's quite a drastic way of doing it to increase your red blood cell count and everything, which is a dodgy subject in of itself. It sounds weird even talking about it in that way because of the associations. But, if you can take yourself to another geographical place to do it, then why not?
Why not?
When you come back, it seems like from everything I've found out about you is that you notice that you run well after that. How long does that phase last for after you're coming out of that altitude training session?
It depends, I guess, how long you're there. So a lot of my trips have been relatively short. They say kind of at least 3 weeks to really see.
That's a long time.
Which is a long time. Most of my trips in the past have only been 2 weeks because that's the holiday that I've had from school. So 2 weeks is all I've ever done. 3 weeks is the ideal time period, and some people respond differently. So some people can come straight down and race straight away and feel amazing. Some people it takes like a week for it to really kick in, but they always say there's this grey area around 5 to 7 days where you can feel a bit rubbish. So you have to time your races really carefully, because if you get it in that grey period, you can actually not run particularly well.
That's quite tactical. I just assume you come off the mountain like a goat. One thing I read was about a time when you went altitude training and you talked about you probably went a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
Talk me through that. What happened whilst you were out there that meant you were probably pushing maybe a bit too much?
Because I'd been working prior to that trip, right, I've got 2 weeks, I've really got to make this count.
Yeah, the pressure's on.
Exactly, I've got to make this count. I've only got 2 weeks, let's go for it. And I think my mileage just went up way too much. They say only really increase your mileage by 10%, and I think I went from like 60, 70 all the way up to 90, which is just ridiculous. And I don't even know why I thought that was a good idea. And then by the end of the trip, I was feeling this tingling sensation down my quad, and I knew straight away it was a stress response because I've had a few in the past, and I just knew I'd overdone it, and I was just kicking myself because I was like, why? You know better than that. But it's this kind of, you just get carried away.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful environment, and it's just, like you say, it's so much easier because you've got so much time on your hands.
Yeah. And you have this window and this allotted, and you always have this countdown in your head of, I fly back on this day, and I'm at altitude right now. I want to get in what I can.
Yeah.
On the flip side, you could go do a 3-4 week altitude training session, and you can't do that as a teacher. So it's a weird one with you because it's always going to be that seesaw of, I could do this, but I could do that. And you could wake up on different mornings and feel different things. So it must be a balance in your head of trying to pick what's right. Even now, as you go, no, I really like this balance of teaching and athleticism. It'll never go away. You'll be just as aware of, but I know what being a full-time athlete would allow me.
Yeah, exactly. I think I keep coming around full circle. You know, one minute I'm like, I can teach and I can run and I can do it. And then other times it's like, oh, I can't teach and run. It's just too much. And I don't think there'll ever be a right or wrong answer. This year I went away and I did my first 3-week camp because I had the time to do it. But then I came back and I did the 10K British trials and I didn't run any better than the year before. So I think that when you do have work, it forces you to fit your training in. And if it's not a good session, you're just like, well, you know, I only had that hour. I had to do it then and it doesn't matter, and just let it go. Whereas I think if all you do is run and you have a bad session, it's like having a bad day at work. That's it. It's set you up for the day. You've had a bad day at work and then you're thinking about it for the rest of the day.
It comes to this thing of almost tying yourself too strongly to running. And identity in sport is a really tricky thing, and especially when you get to the levels that you've run at and will continue to run at, I think kind of weirdly not being Louise Small, the runner in brackets, is quite an important thing for your development mentally, to stay slightly loose and floating above it. And I still do other things. I'm a teacher. I have other things in my life.
Yeah, I think that whole identity crisis is a big thing. And well, I've had 3 months off now and I've had days where I'm like, I'm fine, I can cope, I'm great, I'm dandy, and doing other things and distracting myself almost. And then I have days, or even like last week, where I was, why is this happening to me? You know, the world's against me. You see other people's performances and you're like, well, I need to be happy for that person. But then deep down you're like, oh, but I want to be running. And you have this kind of jealousy thing going on, and it's a real roller coaster of emotions, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, I can't even go out and go for a run and process it.
That's horrible. And because of how you've grown up, a lot of your contacts and your friendship groups and things like that are runners.
My friends are runners, so you're surrounded by it.
Yeah, you're in a tough position there. You need that go-to friend who just doesn't get running at all, and that way you can switch off and be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't know what a 5K time is. Like when I say, oh, she ran a 15:50, and you go, what? That's quite a healthy person to have around you sometimes. There's just someone outside of that bubble. I think that's a nice thing to stay in touch with those people.
Yeah, definitely.
The jealousy thing's a crazy thing, but because of, oh, it's just Steph 12's my best friend kind of thing type situation, because you want to support that person, and you want to be there for them, and you do that naturally, but there's going to be that contrast of, I kind of wish my calf was holding up a bit better and like my Achilles would sort itself out, because I want to be there with her. And there's a fantastic photo of you cycling alongside Steph 12 when she was training, and that's such a beautiful moment because you're able to support that person and train them, and she'll appreciate you being on the bike more than anyone else being on the bike, because you've been there, you've done that, you know what that experience is like and what she's training for. But even as you're sitting there on the bike and I look at that photo, I can't help but think, yeah, but I wish you didn't have that frame under you, kind of thing. Like, that must be a natural feeling. That's a weird balance.
Yeah, it definitely is. And as I've got older, I've got a lot better at parking that jealousy to one side and being like, no, I have to be happy for people because it is their time to run well. And I honestly believe everybody gets their moment to shine, where everything clicks together, all the consistency comes together, and they run really well. So I've just got to focus on getting myself fit so that I then can run as quick as them when I come back.
It was being rational as well. However well you're doing has no bearing on Steph, and vice versa. So it doesn't make any real difference, apart from the fact it would be quite nice to go for a training run together.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
if you're going,
I love that,
yeah, exactly. But it's beautiful that you can still get out on the bike.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you see in the news a guy that had to have his leg amputated because he was in a car crash, and you kind of sit there a moment and go, what am I complaining about?
Exactly. Get over yourself. The world has a way of putting you back in your place.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you perspective in these amazing moments. The ability that you have, 5K 15:40.
Yeah, that sounds right.
10K 32:34.
Yeah.
Is that a track one as well?
That's track. My road is 33:20.
Okay. And have you noticed across the board that there are certain calculation you think, well, I'm about a minute slower when you go to road compared to track?
Do you know, it's really interesting because I have this discussion with people a lot, and a lot of people have road times that are quicker than their track times, and I cannot get my head around that, because I think the track is the most accurate place for you to run the fastest time, which is why I think with road racing, there's variations in course if they're downhill and wind, and there's so many other factors that can make it a lot quicker. Track is the most realistic way of measuring a 10K.
So
I think I'm just a bit bitter because my 10K road time's slower.
Half marathon is 1:12 and marathon is 2:39, but these are slightly unexplored territories that you haven't really knuckled down. Be like, I'm going to go half marathon, I'm going to go really marathon. So that would be fascinating to watch your career and see what the marathon could be one day. And I think there's hope in that because it doesn't require the explosiveness that maybe your muscle's going to go, oh, I'm not so sure about this. And there's that endurance element. So there's something about the marathon that does recapture the public's imagination. When you go from this explosive track stuff, you kind of go to this weird grey phase of who could name the top 10, you might be able to, 10 milers in the world.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? These weird distances. But you get back up to marathon, everyone's,
Everyone
London.
knows the
There's
big
this,
dogs, yeah.
there's this slight aura that surrounds the marathon. So
Yeah.
when you say, they're a marathon runner for GB or whatever, there's something quite nice about that.
I think the nice thing about the marathon as well is it's really starting to become an event for younger athletes as well. You know, you've got Charlotte Purdue, Lily Partridge, who are only a year older than me. You've got Steph now venturing into it. Jess Piaski's just run a really quick time. Steph Davies, all these girls are much younger than your typical marathon runners. And it's just nice to have so many really good British girls running really fast times.
When you look at this ability, is there any history in the family of anyone that ran?
Not that I'm aware of.
Neither your mum or dad ever had any kind of running background or anything?
No, Dad did trials riding, on motorbikes. Mum didn't really have a sport, so neither of them were particularly what they would say sporty. They did sport at school, but none of them took up a sport, so to speak.
What's so fascinating is even now when we just had the European Cross Country Championships on the TV, and you can tell that not only is are your parents into it, your mum knows stuff. Like, she's knowledgeable in this. And this is because of you, because she produced a daughter that took this up and had an ability for it. And that's quite a fascinating thing to see, that you're not even running, you're standing next to her in the kitchen and she's still focused on the screen.
Yeah.
Oh, is so-and-so running? Oh, she ran a good time. I'm like, whoa, she knows this stuff.
Yeah.
When you come back from this injury phase, I'm being incredibly forthcoming with my optimism, like you will be.
Yes, I will.
And I wonder whether when you come back after this one, because this has been a big one, this has been a big time out for you, is it going to change your attitude slightly to training and just appreciating those ribbon moments should they come again?
Yeah, 100%. I've always been quite good. I'm definitely an athlete that's had several injuries over the years. We always come back, and I say with my parents, and we always say, when I come away from a performance and I'm a little bit disappointed, we say, well, you're running, and that's the most important thing. We always promote consistency, because I believe that consistency can then equate to those big performances. If you're constantly injured, you're not going to be able to get that consistent training in. So I'm definitely remembering where I've come from and thinking about the positives, and the positives for me are always, well, you're running, and that's the most important thing. So I think when I come back from that, I think it'll be even more poignant if I do come back and I don't have to have an operation, because I think by the way the doctors are talking, this could be very much a make or break for me, whether I can carry on running. I think deep down I've always thought that can I walk away from the sport? Can I let it go? And I think deep down I've said, yes, I could if I had to. And I think I almost have to get to that place for me to then be able to return to running, if that makes sense. I think you've got to be able to let it go. And it's been hard for me to kind of, that realisation that I could let it go, but I don't want to.
Of course you
don't. I think that's the bit of me, there's still that fighter in me that's like, it's not going to happen. I think I've got to be able to let it go and find something else to put my passion into if it does all go wrong.
Well, it's hard as well because you're 27, you're 5 months younger than me. And if we were having this conversation, you were 39, you'd be like, well, biologically, glory days have gone and maybe this is a chance to turn to, I don't know, cross-country skiing or whatever you just went. When you still have that 2 in front of your age, a lot of people I've spoken to never appreciate their 20s. And 30s will be amazing too. You can still be in your absolute prime.
Yeah.
My own father, all his PBs came at 35.
Yeah.
Which always makes me so hopeful.
Yeah. Got plenty of years.
Got all this time.
Yeah.
But at the same time does move quickly. And when you have busy jobs and you're a teacher, like that does fly by. So I get it. And because you're only 27, it is young.
Yeah.
So that's amazing that you're getting to a point where you can, okay, I've been through that process of like what that would be like if I had to let it go. But yeah.
I don't think I'd be a very happy person.
No. I don't think. No.
Really, really hard decision. But there are other things in life to do, and running is a part of my life. There's other avenues to explore, things that I have to consider as well.
Youth is on your side. You said in that post one time, the human body is amazing. Don't give up on it, you said.
Yeah.
That's such a cool line. Because as much as it's quite nice to fantasize about, what if I could break 14 minutes? There is a beauty to being an okay runner.
Yeah.
Has there ever been a point when you wish away your talent a little bit and just think, I'd just like to enjoy running and not have, there's this idea of responsibility of talent that because you're able to do it, you feel like you have to go and perform?
I definitely have struggled with the pressure, not that other people put on me, that I put on myself mainly over the years. I've performed at a high level, so I expect myself to continue to perform at that level. So I have struggled with that element in the past. And that's where I get this whole don't take yourself too seriously, stay relaxed sort of attitude, because I found that works best for me. I know for some people, they need to go into a race and they need to say, I'm going to win this, otherwise I'm walking home or something like that. But I think the problem is I'm far too competitive. I think there's that. I don't know if it's innate. Maybe it is, because my brother's pretty competitive as well. I just want to be the best and perform at my best. And if I'm totally honest, I don't know whether I would be a hobby runner. Does that make sense?
It does. Because it's a bit of an all or nothing thing for you.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe that's because I've competed at that high level. If I'd started as a hobby runner...
You didn't really know any different.
Exactly. And then and then made my way up. But I think I always do wonder whether me performing at such high level from a young age has then put this extra pressure and expectation on myself. You know, my big goal is to go to the Olympics. Whether that's realistic or not, I don't know.
I think it is.
But when you achieve the goal of competing for Great Britain at 15, you then have to set a bigger goal, if that makes sense. Whereas some people I know have come from it from a hobby runner background and they've come good much later and they achieve things like GB and then they're fulfilled because their goal was to achieve that. I think because I achieved that from such a young age, my targets have been set higher and higher. But again, the Olympics is another one that I've realised I may never achieve that. And I'm okay with that. But I need that goal there to keep me going and keep me motivated.
It's tricky because you kind of don't know any different. So I'm trying to ask you from this hobby athlete perspective, but it's not a perspective you've ever had the pleasure of having, because weirdly you've sort of been crippled, ironically, by the ability and the talent and the times that you've produced. It's a very weird and a very unique angle, and one of the fascinating things is by being a part of AFD, Old Shot Farnham District, one of the premier clubs in the UK, is that you surround yourself with incredible talent. Drop names like Lily Partridge, Charlotte Purdue, obviously Steph herself. It can give you a bit of a warped perspective. You as Louise Small, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that at one point you've probably been like, oh God, I'm really slow at the moment. And yet you might have just run a 17.5 for 5K. Yeah. The average parkrun time has just gone up from 28 minutes to 29 minutes. I mean, these are astronomically different. And there must be some moments where you've gone and had a go at something at a far more amateur level. Oh, wait, this is the population running.
Yeah.
And oh, no, I am in a different league altogether, and not wishing to try to encourage you to boast or anything, but there must have been some moments where that perspective has changed a lot, where you go to the European Championships and you're like, oh, I'm nobody, I can't run. And then you go to your local fun run and it's like, what?
Yeah.
Have you had those moments where you've forgotten how good you are?
I think, like you say, you surround yourself with those similar sort of people to you. So I've always been surrounded by people like Steph and Charlie, who have always been that little bit better than me. And that's what I've always compared myself to. And I'm not as good as them. So I've got, work harder and strive to be as good as them.
Do you know, I'll tell you a quick story. I had this really fascinating conversation with this guy the other day called Callum. Now, Callum is, I know he's broken 15 for a 5K, so this guy's quick. Like, he can move. So in that moment, I thought, what do I really want to know from Callum? And so I said to him, and the way I phrased it, I said, I asked him, I said, how many parkruns have you done? And he went, oh, not many at all. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, because the average Joe on the street would think that if, like, say there's a guy called Tom who runs 25 minutes, they would think, if I could run even sub 18, let alone sub 17, sub 16, sub 15, etc., every Saturday I'd be down the parkrun because it'd be so fun to just go smash it. So I told this to him and I said, that's the way people think. But if I really think about it, Callum, I would suspect that you would probably almost find that awkward, because he just stopped me there. He was like, yeah, awkward's the right word. He was like, I've done some races where I had to honestly slow down because it was just ridiculous. And it looked stupid, me turning up and just, literally like the next guy was a 1930. And if he comes in at like 15:05, it almost looks arrogant. And again, that's that responsibility of talent. He feels like he can't race at certain places, or he just has to jog around or run it with someone. And he gave me an example. He said, my warm-ups look ridiculous because I'm doing heel flicks and all this stuff, and everyone else is just there like, should we go to a cafe after? And it's, do you know what I mean? So it's a completely different world. Yeah. And I thought that is fascinating. On your record, I mean, it may be slightly inaccurate, but you've done 2 parkruns ever.
Parkruns, yeah.
You ran 17 something at Alice Holt. That's a very hilly parkrun, so that's ridiculous. And that was in 2014. It still stands, Louise, as the fastest course record for a female. And you did it once. I look at that and I'm like, I mean, partly I just want to give you a brief reminder. Yeah. That's ridiculous. It's 2019. It was 2014. You went to Alice Holt and it still stands, no female. And there are hundreds of females running that every single week. Yeah. The next closest is like 18, 19. Can you relate to what Callum was saying? How do you frame that in your head?
I can see what Callum is saying. It can feel a little bit, I guess showboating, a little bit embarrassing. I don't know. I'm now thinking about it. For example, if I do the Hampshire County, so I've won that 4 times in a row, and I think I know deep down it's probably an easy one for me to win, and I win it by quite a long way, but I kind of enjoy that, and I like the fact that I've won it 4 times. Why not? And it's nice to run a race where it does feel kind of easy, because the big ones feel really, really hard. So it's nice to run a race where it doesn't feel as hard. I don't know. Now maybe I should feel embarrassed.
No, not at all. No, I absolutely think you should go and crush people on a daily basis. I think it raises people's standards and go, wow, you either take inspiration from it or you kind of go, whoa, I will never do that, and it puts you off. And that's just down to you as a person. That's not your responsibility. That's how people take your performances.
I think maybe being a female as well, I won't always win it anyway, because there generally will be at least one male. Like when I did Aldershot, I think there was 2 males maybe that were quicker.
Yeah, Alice Holt that day in 2014, you won it overall, I checked.
Did I?
Yeah, you weren't even first female. You were just first, full stop. The female got to be taken out of it, which is a beautiful thing as well. My dad's local park run where my parents live is down in Devon, which I ran the other day. It's a very flat, fast course, apart from one very sharp turn. As long as you don't get headwinds, you can get PB territory for a 5K. And it was won the other day for the first time by a female. And it was just really nice to see that it was like, number one, Jane, she's like low 18 or something. Yeah. Really, really quick girl. But yeah, Alice Holt that day, you did. So
I think for me particularly, sometimes some men are really good. They're like really supportive of women and if they beat them, but some men really don't like it, and it becomes a bit of a challenge to try and race a man. So sometimes I quite like being the first overall.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that must be a weird reception from men. Again, that comes down to the man and how he treats it. You must come across that.
What's she doing?
So looking forward into the future, there's a big question mark. There are unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen. It depends on how this improves. I've always been one to be very optimistic, and I not only hope, but I deep down feel like you just will be able to get past the non-surgery option and navigate around that. Are you optimistic about the future?
I stopped putting time frames on it just because that was then getting me down if I wasn't achieving those time frames. Because originally we'd said that I'd be back running in 12 weeks. I am at 12 weeks now and I'm definitely not ready to do that. I need to get to the point where I can do a complete calf raise, and I'm halfway there.
Is that a mobility or a strength thing?
Both. Once I can fully calf raise with no pain, and I've got to be able to do a few of them, I'm then able to run. If I'm only at half range, then I'm not going to be able to cope with the load of running. I'm then going to have to progress to jumping drills and things like that, and then transfer into running. So in my mind, I've kind of written off the next year, just because if it's sooner than that, then at least it'll be a positive. I don't want to put any expectations on races. Originally, I wanted to do London Marathon again, but I doubt that's going to be the case. The big goal was obviously to try and get time for Tokyo again. I think in Paris now, let's go for another 4 years. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Olympics are always a weird one because it's such big time spans. You have this small window and then 4 years again. Everyone just talks about 4 years.
Yeah, and then
that's huge. And when you're 27, that's massive.
Exactly. And I guess Commonwealths in between that are in Birmingham. So there's so many things on the horizon for me to do. I think even in my darkest days, and I'm like, oh, I'm never going to get back running. Deep down, I know I will.
You just will. I think one of the questions in the future as well is, having had the experiences you've had, could you settle into running at a slightly lower level if you had to in 10, 15 years time? I mean, that's going to happen anyway with the natural
with age. Yeah, no, I've always wanted that. When I finish, will I completely stop? Will I carry on, like you say, at kind of a hobby level? I don't know. It's a funny one. I don't know whether I might want to take a break because it has been very serious and intense. Like, I've taken the sport very seriously from a young age. I didn't go out and party and drink a lot. We were having this conversation the other day about making sacrifices. I said they weren't sacrifices because I felt like it was too strong. It was choices that I made.
What is there an argument that you might have sacrificed?
A normal sort of
just a childhood. Oh, right, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
I didn't really go out to parties and things like that because I just, everything was for my running and I took it really seriously. I think I got a bit more relaxed when I got to university because I wanted to enjoy that experience. But yeah, we were having a discussion as a family. We were saying that I'd sacrificed things, but I didn't like to look at it as a sacrifice, more as a kind of choices that I'd made in favour of my running. So maybe when I get to the end, I might want a break from it, but I don't know. I just think I'd still just love running. I'd like to carry on.
Of course. The funny thing is as well is that the other reason it might not necessarily be a sacrifice is because it's a trade-off. you don't just cut out house parties and then that's not a thing. There's something else takes its place,
Yeah,
and that thing is a
exactly.
completely different experience. And I would argue probably a cooler experience. And like I did some house parties and I did some intensive training, so I like to think I had a bit of a look into both kind of worlds. And I've been on the track, not in the same group, but I've seen elite people running around.
Yeah.
The way I always look at it is, if you do, like yourself, go through those experiences, I find that you get incredibly close. I could have met someone at a house party and that's great and they're a cool person, and then I see them at the next party, but it'll never be what it was like with the guys I trained with at university. And that collapsing on the track at the end, there's a bonding there, and I had a closer relationship with them than anyone I ever met in that what's considered my sort of socializing years. Because drinking, it doesn't really connect you in the way it kind of makes you think you will. Actually, sometimes that comes through the suffering, and running is an amazing way of gaining friendships. And I think people like Steph and you aren't just good friends because you get along and you're compatible and whatever, but also you've been through some bloody tough situations together, and you've slogged it out in the mud, and there's something about just suffering together that makes you almost vaguely inseparable. And I've experienced that with people, and that's an amazing thing. So I don't think you've sacrificed anything really.
No, thank you.
Well, Louise, that's been amazing. Thank you for talking to me.
That was crazy.
You have a fan in me. Although I can't really be a fan now because I know fans are meant to be a distant thing. So I feel like maybe you're just a cool acquaintance now. Yeah, it's just fascinating with your story in particular. And as much as it is a negative thing, it just makes your story all the more interesting. And like when you look back, when you are 39, for example, that's terrible, isn't it? When you're there's people who listen to this who are like 50 and 60. I know they are, and they'll be like, what? You know what I mean? When you're 39 and you're looking back at what's happened so far, because you're so young, I think that it will be all the richer because you've had the lows and with the highs. I'm not saying other people's story were boring, but if Mo Farah just keeps being successful, like, who needs to hear about that? The golden moments shine out that much stronger, and that Poland moment, I don't think it'd be as special for you if you'd won a lot of them because of lack of injury. Actually, like you say, so many things coming together, and the negatives make the positives that much better when they happen. But yeah, thank you so much for speaking to me. And I think that your quote about the human body being amazing and don't give up on it is so true. And I think you should just remember that. Like, don't ever quit on it. I hope that you don't have to do the surgery option. Yeah, and I hope we get to run together one day.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Hello, Harry here. Thank you for listening to this episode of Jog On. As always, thank you for your continued support. I can't tell you how much joy I get from creating and sharing these episodes. And if you're new to the podcast, a warm welcome to the Jog On crew. Search for Jog On with Harry Morgan in YouTube. It's incredibly exciting every time we get a new subscriber to the videos. You can follow us on Instagram at Jog On Podcast, and if you have a guest in mind, get in contact by emailing thisisjogon@gmail.com. All that is left to say is love your running, never give up on your body, go for that run. I'm Harry Morgan, and this is Jog On.